iPhone 14 Pro Max has the Apple A16 Bionic chipset, the fastest chip on the market today when it comes to Apple products. Over here, I have the iPad Pro 11-inch M2. Now, if you're wondering why I'm making this content, it's because these are my two most used Apple products I have. I absolutely love the iPad Pro 11-inch M2. It basically does everything, and I love this beast right here, the iPhone 14 Pro Max. But I want to see which one is faster here, because the M2 is what I want to see in the next iPhone. I don't know if they're going to go to an M series chip in the iPhone, but I like to see an M series chip someday in an iPhone. Let's begin with a boot up in 3, 2, go, and see which one gets there faster. Now, I do like the OLED display on the iPhone a little bit more. It definitely gives me definitely deeper contrast ratios and stuff like that. But there is some use cases where I think somebody could just pick up an iPad Pro, save themselves hundreds of dollars over an iPhone if they're going to be primarily using it as a home product, because honestly, both these phones have all the same apps essentially, and they both do have, you know, basically the same software. This is iPad OS, this is iOS, but it's pretty close, besides the fact that iPad gives you more multitasking. So we do have dynamic island over here, and over here we just have bezels, no notches, no punch holes, just the way I like it. Let's go ahead and see how fast this unlocks. So with this, very quick, of course, but what I like about the iPad Pro, unlike some other iPads, is that you do get Face ID here as well, and it's just about as fast on this product as well. So there's no major difference there. Now on both these products, we are using iOS 16.5.1. Well, this one's iPad OS. I go like this because it's basically just a tablet version of iOS. You'll see right here, iPad OS 16.5 and then iOS 16.5.1 on both of them. I'm not running the betas here because those are not official softwares. As of the recording of this video, they're beta softwares, but you'll see right here, the latest official on both. Now both of these do have ProMotion display, which I do really love about both of them. I feel like the app library is smoother though on the iPad. It just looks like the animation is a little smoother when I go over like that. It just looks a little buttery smoother to me. That's just my take. But in terms of control center, basically the same. And scrolling through these, if you go to this, it feels like the same product essentially, which I quite like. Now to confirm this is the M2 series, I'm going to show you right there, Apple M2. This is clocked at 3.49 gigahertz. And then over here, this is the Apple A17, and it's clocked at 3.46. So it's slightly underclocked versus the iPad. And we do have 6 gigs of RAM, and the iPad is 8 gigs of RAM. 8 gigs of RAM is one of the most amount of RAM you'll find on a iOS, iPad OS type product. So let's see if in day-to-day we get the same exact performance from the A16 to the M2. The M2 supposedly the faster beast. Let's go into calendar, and about the same there. We'll go into, we're gonna skip calculator because I don't have, Apple still hasn't put an actual calculator. I have this one here, but this is not the, you know, the official Apple calculator. So we'll go over here to clock, and you'll see pretty even stopwatch, about the same. Timer, looks like the iPad a little faster there. When in, no major difference. Let's go to the weather app, which is a lot more expansive. And it looks like because the iPad loads a little bit more of an expansive area, it loads this stuff here, but in the side pane view, it definitely took slightly longer. But I love that they finally brought weather. Now all we gotta see is calculator next. All right, so let's go into Instagram here, and you'll see the iPad might have had that one. That is the largest Instagram I've ever seen over there. Well, probably not. The 12.9 probably has a larger version set up out of there. And we'll go into App Store now. 3, 2, go. And you'll see App Store was actually faster for the iPad. Now let's go ahead and take a look at games. And faster on the iPhone. So I think because maybe the iPad loading a little more content, the iPhone can pop its menus open a little faster. Yeah, it looks like the iPhone can be a little quicker because it's not loading all this content at once. So maybe the iPhone actually doesn't need an M2 or an M series chip. Maybe they'll stick with the A line. And you'll see that was a little faster for the iPad. But like I say, if you guys want to do like a iPad Pro instead of an iPhone 14 Pro Max, you can actually get the keyboard case and this iPad for cheaper than one iPhone 14 Pro Max, depending on the configuration you go with. So you'll see faster on the left. Yeah, again, I think it's totally due to the content loading. So it's looking like the iPhone in this speed test so far, maybe a little snappier in some areas, just due to the fact that the iPad once again slower there because you have to load up a little bit more. And so let's go into Amazon in 3, 2, go. You can see it looked like the iPad was a little faster. Let's go into Starbucks. Looked like the iPad was a little faster. We'll go into Best Buy now. And you'll see faster for the iPad. I feel like the iPad is sometimes a little smoother with its scrolling for some reason. Let's go into eBay here on both phones, or phones, phone and tablet. We'll go into eBay. You'll see about the same. I just feel like, you know, when at home or when you're not on the go, or even if you're traveling, the iPad is basically a huge iPhone that does everything the iPhone does and more, because it can do multitasking and stuff like that. And then if you want, you get the iPad mini if you want a smaller, but I think the 11-inch might be a good sweet spot. You go with the Air, you get a 60 hertz panel and stuff like that. So still laminated, but 60 hertz. So you'll have to deal with that. Let's go into Asphalt 9 and see how this one performs here. Gaming, of course, is going to be 10 times better on an iPad. And it looks like the iPad in the lead. So gaming so far looking faster for the iPad for sure. With the iPhone coming in second, but not by a lot. You can still enjoy games though, because the 14 Pro Max is large enough. But of course you can connect controllers and stuff, and then it would be even more fun for the iPad M2. So pretty good there. Let's head up out of there, and you'll see the animations are essentially identical for both. Let me go ahead and turn off auto rotate so it'll stop doing that. Let's go into Call of Duty, 3, 2, go. And in this area, it should be the iPad once again. I just feel like the GPU, just the performance of the iPad just seems to be a little more optimized for heavy tasks, but the iPhone faster here looks like on Call of Duty than the iPad. So that was ready to rock first here. And then we have the iPad coming in second, but of course I'm gonna want to do the iPad again for gaming. Let's go into Temple Run 2 and we'll see which one gets here first. I don't know what's up with this load on the iPhone. It's been going a little bit slow today. It looks like on some of these. The iPad much faster there on Temple Run 2. To me, it looks like the M2 might be a little faster. I missed that one totally. Let me head up out of here. Caught myself on that one. Let's go into Subway Surfers, 3, 2, go. And we'll see which one's quicker. It's still the iPhone on this. See, they're trading. One is on the iPhone, now on the iPad. So, I mean, they're trading here. Let's go into Hill Climb 2. Now you'll see the iPhone a little bit slower here. So why, I don't know why they keep trading, but it's looking like the iPhone a little slower here on this game. So it depends on the game, it looks like. Let's go into Geekbench 6, and I'm sure developers are developing for both of these products when they're making their applications. Most of them are anyway. Let's go into iMovie, and we'll go into speedtest.net. So overall, I would say they're pretty much neck and neck here. So if you wanted to save money and not use an iPhone, just get an iPad Pro, you could definitely do that and get a cheaper phone if you're not a big phone user, and get essentially the same performance, and in some areas smoother. The 120 hertz ProMotion, I think an app library is smoother, and the iPad has that M2 with more RAM, so long term it'll be a better performer as well. But the iPhone is pretty darn close with that A16 Bionic and its 6 gigs of RAM. Let's go ahead and run through these, just see what we get here with the iPhone. I really love doing this on the iPhone, just going back through the apps. It's so buttery smooth and polished. It's just my favorite phone of all time right now when it comes to animations. I just don't think almost no phone looks better than the iPhone or the iPad when it comes to running back through the applications. It looks like we have a little bit of a loading going on there for App Store, weather, clock, calculator, and calendar. And what's really impressive about iPhone 14 Pro Max and Pro is they don't get too hot even when you're running all of this stuff. Usually in my speed tests, especially on some of my Android phones, they can get really darn hot, you know, when it comes to that. Same with the iPad Pro. This thing doesn't get hot either. That's one of my favorite things about Apple products is they just don't get that hot. So far the iPad, that was just rotation, nothing serious. So far the iPad looking about just as smooth. I'm gonna leave this actually in portrait here. So which one were we on? We were on Subway Surfers. Let's go into Temple Run, Call of Duty, and Asphalt 9. This is gonna flip back one more time. We'll go into Dead Trigger 2, and then we'll go into eBay, Best Buy. It's just a much larger canvas here for the iPad. We'll go into Amazon. We'll go into Groupon. Let me go ahead and close that out. We'll go into Twitter. Scroll over here to App Store, Instagram, weather, clock, and calendar. So providing you that same exact buttery smooth, polished RAM management. Love it here on the iPad as well. I think the iPad was a little bit better as the iPhone started reloading some stuff in the App Store. So the 8 gigs of RAM might be a little bit better as you really push these devices, and the iPad takes much better advantage of its CPU power because it does have more multitasking abilities. Okay, so we have some interesting results here. We have 2543 on a single core for the iPhone 14 Pro Max, 2487 on that multi-core score. Now with that, or with the single core here, now with the multi, here's where it gets interesting. 9,482 on the multi for the iPad, which kind of goes with what I was saying, that when you start pushing it into the games and stuff, the GPUs, things like that, 8 gigs of RAM, this thing can definitely outperform the iPhone. But from a general standpoint, that single core CPU will show why in the day-to-day stuff, it's gonna feel like the exact same product. Now keep in mind the iPad Pro is several $100s cheaper than the iPhone 14 Pro Max. Like I say, if you're computing a lot at home, or you work from home, or you don't really want to buy the latest and greatest iPhone, you can cop a cheaper iPhone and then just get the iPad Pro 11 if you're more of a tablet or computer user, and get essentially all the power this thing has in an iPad form and more when it comes to the multi-core. So definitely we'll take a look at the results of 3D Mark when it's done. I'll be back. And so again, interesting results here. Wildlife Extreme for the iPad is almost double that of the iPhone, with an average frame rate of 19.3 FPS for the iPhone, scoring better than 35% of other devices. Now, after gaming for a little bit, I find that the iPhone does heat up quite a bit. With the iPad, it can heat up to under gaming load, but not quite as much. It's more spread out, and you'll see a 38.1 FPS on the iPad. And so definitely the iPad Pro is for sure going to be the one that you want to get for gaming graphic performance. It is going to be way better than the iPhone, which is pretty insane considering that you pay less for the iPad Pro. Of course, it has a cellular option as well if you need cellular data, so you can definitely do that as well. But definitely, iPad Pro is an absolute monster performer with that M2 CPU. The future is only really bright for that. We're going to go ahead now and take a look at a iMovie render. We're going to see how fast it can export this. So let's go ahead and save this video. We'll save it, and I'll be back when they are done exporting. And you've seen in our video export that the iPad also finishes first by a decent amount, not by a ton, but enough to say as that video gets longer, the iPad will outperform once again. So if you are video editing, they have Final Cut now for the iPad as well. If you are going to really be pushing the power that you want out of an iOS, iPadOS type product, I do believe the iPad is the better pick for you. But I know they're not the same product category, but if you only had to choose between one, I would say the iPad is the more powerful beast here. The iPhone being a great companion device, but definitely the iPad Pro with the M2, the faster performer. So I do think if we did see an M series chip in the next iPhone or an iPhone in the future, it would absolutely destroy the competition. So iPhone, really good here with the Apple A16, but not much difference over the A15. But the M2 iPad, just an absolute beast. And the future, again, is really bright for the upcoming iPads, which will probably have M3 CPUs or M2 Pros or M2 Max chips. We'll have to see what happens there. But thumbs up if you enjoyed this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and let me know your thoughts on, do you prefer iPad or do you prefer iPhone? Or do you prefer just having both together? I'd love to discuss that with you down below. I'll catch you on the next one. Nick here. Be sure to be well, and peace.